Started flying about 2 years ago. So I started flying about 2 years ago, and there's a series of licenses that you have to get in order for you to become a commercial airline pilot, which is what I'm going to be going for. So I started flying about 2 years ago, and I ended up buying a plane just recently, and now I actually teach people on my plane. The plane that I'm going to be showing you guys today is not my plane. It's actually a multi-engine plane, and I'll show you exactly how big it is in comparison to me. So you could see how big just the stabilizer is from how tall I am. And it's actually much taller than 7 feet. So I'm about 5'7", and this is how high the stabilizer is. And I'm gonna actually show you the front of the plane. I'm gonna turn see if I can turn the camera around. So right here. So we have one engine right here and the other engine on that side. Now I'm gonna just show you how big the props are. So this in itself is 76 inches, you guys. And the way that it works is that it's driven by the magnetos in the plane. We have a de-icing system on the plane. You could see how big the tires are as well. We have lighting systems on the aircraft on both sides. We have 3 fuel tanks on each side. So the range on this plane is about 400 nautical miles. And basically you can fly here to Florida in one trip. And when I say here, I mean here in New York to Florida. Okay. And now I want to show you how to get on the plane. See if I can turn this around. There we go. So we have a walkway paper right here, which you just grab on the handle, and literally one leg on here and then one leg would go on top. Just like that. So today I'm not going to be able to start the plane because it's not the plane that I do fly, but I'm going to be able to show you guys inside the cockpit. So this is exactly what the controls look like. And you see a lot of colors over here. You see the black lever. These are your throttles for the engines. You see the blue levers, which is your props. And then you see the red, which is your mixture. Now, every plane is differently started. So every plane has its own starting process. This plane itself is fuel injected, meaning when you would start the plane, it would start up by not just the engines, it would start up by fuel. And that's when your mixtures, the red levers, would come into play. The prop over here, the blue levers, control the pitch angle of your propellers. And this is just your power setting. So everything in the plane, every lever gets moved and gets used when you're flying in cruise flight and on takeoff and on landing. These are the instrument panels. And you have a bunch of your fuel gauges over here. So you have your fuel quantity gauges, you have your oil pressure, you have your oil temperature, and you have your head temperatures. The head temperatures tells you approximately how hot the cylinders are getting and how hot the plane is getting. If something seems to be too much in the red, or if it's coming close to the red line, that means that you might have a potential fire or an electrical failure. You have your instruments of your vacuum. I am not sure if this is backwards, if the image is coming backwards. Is that a little bit better? All right, so you have your amps as well. And now I want to show you guys a full picture or a full backup. Is it upside down? I think it might be coming upside down.
It was good that way.
It was good that way?
No, the other way.
This way?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, there we go. So I just wanted to show you a larger picture of it from far away. I know the camera is moving like reverse camera, so that's why it's harder to capture. But you have your two controls. On this specific multi-engine plane, there's no brakes on the right side. So I am sitting from the right side. There's only brakes on the left side for this type of aircraft. Every plane is completely different, the way that it's designed, the make and the model of the aircraft. But this plane, in itself, this model does not come with brakes on the right side. So actually, I did my training in this exact multi-engine plane. You also have a GPS right here. And obviously, when the plane starts, it starts charging its battery and alternator all together. The alternator charges the battery. And then you have your master switch that would come on. You have your, this is a Garmin 530. They don't make these anymore, but it is fully equipped to do a bunch of functions, to fly into clouds. It has a bunch of amazing things that help you find the airport and where you're going. You have your altimeter right here. And then you have your vertical speed indicator right here, which tells you how many feet per minute you're climbing. This is called a VOR, which is your omni-bearing radial system, which basically is a bunch of instrument stuff that tells you where you're flying to a specific station and how long it takes you to get to that station. And again, you don't really use this until you are flying in cloud or really bad weather. And then you have your heading indicator right here. I'm not sure which way to move, right here. So this tells you which heading you're on, and you compare it to your magnetic compass right here. You also have this pretty instrument, blue over brown instrument. That's your attitude indicator. So that would tell you exactly how far the nose is from the horizon. So if it's in the blue, that means you're pitched up, the nose is up. If it's in the brown, that means your nose is down and you're descending. So that itself is your attitude indicator. Right next to it, you have your airspeed indicator. I want to get a little bit closer actually. So your airspeed indicator, if I can get this right. Okay, this way. So your airspeed indicator is measured in different arcs. So you have the white arc, which tells you that your airspeed's too low. You have the green arc that tells you you're in the normal range. And then you also have a yellow arc that tells you you're in the caution range. This plane is able to fly at basically the speed of commercial airline jets. It's able to go up to 250 nautical miles, which is, it's pretty fast actually. That's like going 330 miles per hour. So it's a strong plane. It is really cold and it is really roomy back here as well. So it fits up to 6 people, usually 2 pilots in the front and then 4 people in the back. I've flown this plane myself a bunch of times. It's a great plane. Unfortunately, they're selling this because the market is very high for planes right now. But that's pretty much how big the plane is. I want to just show you in comparison to the ground. So this is my feet right here, and this is how big and how high up the plane is. These are our antennas for the aircraft. So one is for GPS, one is for communications, one's for the radios, and they're for different instruments. So I just wanted to give you guys a tour of the aircraft. I know the image is coming out a little bit backwards, so it might help if I turn it this way so I can control more of how to show you guys. So I just wanted to show you in comparison, there's smaller planes on this aircraft. Actually, there's a lot of different planes on this airport. Some are high wing, some are low wing. this plane right here, I don't know if you guys can see. So this is a high wing, and the wings are obviously high, but airflow is much more over the wings if it's a high wing. So what does that mean? That means when it's coming on, landing, if it's coming in for landing or it's taking off, it's gonna have a harder time landing because there's more airflow over the wings, because air is produced much more underneath the wing than a low wing. So the design of the aircraft definitely controls how much airflow is going over and under the wing. So I just wanted to know if you guys have any questions while I am talking about the plane. Okay, I don't think so.
I have a short question from somebody
Go
in the
ahead.
chat. Avery's asking, for this type of plane, do you need a co-pilot or can you fly it by yourself?
That's actually a really good question. This is a single pilot airplane. So you are able to fly by yourself. Like I actually mentioned, there's no brakes on the right side. So really the co-pilot being there on the right side, and I want to mention that the captain always sits on the left side. So having a co-pilot in this plane really wouldn't help as much on landing, takeoff, and taxiing, but it would help mostly on just helping in flight. If somebody needs extra help with the GPS or they need extra help with trying to figure out and navigate in the plane, they would only help with that. So this is actually a single pilot plane. You do not need two pilots for this plane. Okay, and I'm gonna get more into my story. I'm just gonna walk out of the airport. I'm gonna let flight ops. I just want to shout them out because they've been very helpful letting me in. That is flight operations. You guys want to say hi?
What? Oh,
to the school, yeah. You guys,
how are you?
just want to thank flight operations so much for letting me in because I did not have my badge. Oh, look, we got so many questions now. Oh, they're just waving. All right, so yeah, you can let me out now. Yeah, I'll finish up over there. Thank you so much again.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's this is why it's important to have your badge, kids. And I'll just show them the highway one more time. No, it's all right. I was here flying to Saratoga in the morning actually before, so
Where you gonna go?
we went to ICE, so we had to get the GPS updated.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you doing?
The new aircraft, so I believe over here this week, but Danny was in Israel all the time, so now that he just got back, I'm gonna try to move it this week. I think flight ops needs a little bit more, like just to see.
Insurance and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much again.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, you guys. So I just wanted to shout them out because I did not have my badge on me today, and you're supposed to have your badge on you every time you're at the airport, which was actually shame on me for doing that. It is fairly cold, so I'm just gonna head to the car real quick and finish up over here. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about my story and how exactly I chose to become a pilot. Because I know, okay, there we go. Because I know there's a lot of decisions that come into play on becoming a pilot. Just not if you can hear me. Okay, cool. So I know that there's a lot of decisions that come into play about becoming a pilot and exactly like what route to take and what to do and what not to do. I started after I graduated college, where I met Abby, and I went to St. John's University for a degree in physics and mathematics. So I actually had a background in math and science, and I wanted to be an aerospace engineer and work for NASA. and basically work on rockets. So that's where my passion and my interest for aviation came from. And I know everyone is different. And now that I've become such a big part of aviation, I've learned that a lot of people's background doesn't have to be math, it doesn't have to be science. You actually don't even have to be that great at math to become a pilot. All you really just need are analytical skills. You really just need to be willing to work hard, determination, and just to make sure that you have situational awareness, which is a huge part of becoming a pilot. And the other thing is that I know it costs a lot of money. When I first started aviation, I began at a program which is called ATP. It's an airline transport pilot program. And the way that it works is that it's about a year program. At least it was a year program. Now I think they cut it down to 7 months. And the way that it works is either you could take out a loan, or if you're fortunate enough, you can pay fully up front. It's like an $80,000 program. I remember at that time I took out a loan to start that program. I ended up leaving because I ended up finding other options to finish my program. There's a bunch of scholarships out there. There's the Woman in Aviation scholarship program. There's a bunch of different websites where you can apply for scholarships, especially as high school students and students that do not even have their license right now. There's a lot of scholarships targeting your age and minorities. There's a lot of scholarships out there that are targeting women right now. The airline industry and United Airlines, for specific, are hugely targeting women and minority pilots right now. And bonuses that they are trying to fill these quotas of minorities and women, and they're providing a lot of scholarships. I know JetBlue has a scholarship, United Airlines has a scholarship, Delta is coming out with scholarships. There's a lot of international companies that are coming out with scholarships. All you really have to do is do your research. I know when I first started, it was pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, everything was moving fine. And then when COVID did happen, um, apparently a lot of schools stopped the funding for scholarships. And when COVID also happened, what happened? Travel stopped. So when I got into flight training, a month in, COVID had happened, and I stopped flight training for 3 months. A lot of my friends in the airlines, they got furloughed. People were not traveling. So the airline industry got a huge hit. But now COVID is still going on. Now is the time to get into aviation. The signing bonuses are amazing. And I did get asked a question, how much is the salary for a pilot? So your starting salary is not, it used to be horrible, for all the work that you put in. It used to be about 65,000 just for starting. Now it's gone up to about 120,000 starting. And remember, you're coming from just getting your licenses to fly to a brand new small jet. When you first get into the airlines, you're not going to go to a major airline. You're going to go to a regional airline, which is under your major carriers. So, for example, if I take American Airlines, for example, when you get to your 1,500 hours of flight training or flight time, you get an interview with whichever airline you apply to. You go under the major airlines. So your major airlines would be American Airlines, Delta, United, JetBlue, any of the larger aircraft airlines that you guys have heard of and you guys usually take. Now, your regional airlines are exactly those major airlines, but they just do the connecting flights. So you would be flying the smaller aircrafts. Now, you go through a bunch of sim training, a bunch of training in general to get type rated for that aircraft. After you spend about 1,000 jet hours, which takes about 2 years at the regional airlines, you will upgrade to captain. Now your pay does double. Now, after you become captain at the regional airlines, you end up going to the major airlines. Once you make the major airlines, then that's when you really start seeing the big bucks. Your pay goes up to 250, 300, 400,000 per year. And of course, you have the flight benefits on top of that. And you also have fully covered dental insurance, medical insurance for you and your entire family. Yes, the money is there, but that's not the reason why you want to get into aviation. I've seen a lot of people that get into aviation for the money, and halfway there they quit. You want to get into aviation because you really love to fly. Um, Before I became a pilot, I was working at $1 billion company, and it was the biggest medical dental supplier company in the world. And of course, the money was great, but I was miserable with life. You want to chase a dream, you want to chase a goal that you know you are going to love no matter what happens, and not just for the money. Because if you were chasing a job for the money, you could do anything in the world, but you want to fly because you really love to. So that's what I just want to put out there, because yes, you'll make great money in anything you do, and flying is one of those jobs as well. And in the beginning, you won't see the money as much, and you'll be putting in a lot of hard work, a lot of time, a lot of money up front, and you'll see it later on in return for years to come. And you'll be traveling the world, but you really want to do it because you love flying and you love traveling. And honestly, I started about 2 years ago. I quit my job and I left grad school. And I took a leap of faith, and now I own and I'm flight instructing, and I'm on my way to the airlines, and I would not give it up for the world. So definitely, if you are looking to become a pilot, I would recommend you guys just go do an intro flight. You have to be at least 17 years old to get your private pilot license, but you can start flying as soon as 16 years old. So I'm not sure what the age of you guys are, but if you're 16 and you're interested, visit your local flight school. Just type in on Google flight school and go book an intro flight. It's about $200, but it might be the best $200 you ever spent. So I just wanted to talk about the scholarships, because I know aviation can be really, really hard to pay for, but it is one of the best things that you could do. Um, and if you guys have any questions, if you guys need any help, just please don't hesitate to reach out. If you want to provide my email, I'm always good with that, getting back to you guys. I am flight training people right now to get their licenses. I've been where people have been, and I know how hard it could be to make a decision based off of so many other decisions that go into and factor into making a decision. So I hope that makes sense.
We have another question in the chat
So
from Avery. She's asking how you
mhm.
can become a pilot for recreational purposes instead of professionally, if there's a difference there.
That's a great question. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's two ways that you can do it. You can either license, which is basically getting your official license to fly, or you can get a sports recreational pilot, which is not a complete pilot's license. It does not require, and I'll break down the differences between that. So with a private pilot license, you have to take a written exam, you have to get a medical done, and you have to do the entire flight training of a regular private pilot. And it's your first license before becoming a commercial pilot. So you can either do it that way, and that gives you all rights to basically carry passengers. It gives you the right to rent a plane and go up whenever you want, as long as you are in legal standing. And what does legal standing mean? It means that you have a medical, that you are current on the aircraft that you're flying. And current meaning every 90 days you have to go up and do 3 takeoff and landings in the same type of aircraft, either at night or either during the day, depending on when you're taking off and you're flying. So that would be a private pilot license. If you want your sport and recreational pilot's license, you don't need a medical. It's not a complete pilot's license, so it expires every 180 180 days. And I do have some students that are trying to just become recreational pilots, and I do work differently with them. So the training for a recreational pilot is much more relaxed. So I believe you're not allowed to take up more than 2 passengers at a time. And every 180 days, your endorsement, so it's not a license, it's like an endorsement that a flight instructor can only write off and give you permission to fly. So that means that if somebody was going for their recreational pilot's license, every 180 days, they would have to do a recurrent flight with a flight instructor with me so I can sign them off saying that they are good to go. Since an actual pilot's license expires every 2 years, that you have to do a flight review. But a recreational sports pilot, because you don't need a medical, you don't have to take a written exam. Every 180 days, you have to go up with a flight instructor and reissue that flight privilege to go fly. So of course you can do it for fun. Those are two different ways that you could do it.
I have another question. It's coming from me.
Sure.
I know that you
Okay.
mentioned before that you wanted to work for NASA.
Mhm.
Is this sort of a stepping stone to maybe wanting to become an astronaut later on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always wanted to be an astronaut ever since I was 8 years old. I remember that was the first job I ever wanted to do. When we were in kindergarten or preschool or whatever, I remember the first thing I wanted to do was be an astronaut. Um, Flight training has definitely um, encouraged me to continue following that dream. And I'll tell you why, because times have changed in aviation. It's not just, you go and become a pilot, especially with everything that we're seeing with Blue Origin, we're seeing with Virgin Galactic, we're seeing with SpaceX, even with NASA too. The next coming years, the pilots aren't just being put into a cockpit to fly people for airlines. The next pilots of the generation are actually flying the shuttle to space. They're flying and they're doing trips to space and they're coming back at the same day. So I've seen the requirements for becoming a pilot for the space companies, and all you really need is 1,000 jet hours, which is not anything out of the ordinary for a regular pilot. So it has definitely, and I would say right now, if you want to be an astronaut, start flight training because it's definitely possible nowadays.
Very cool. Another
So
question that I
yeah.
personally have is
Yeah.
being a pilot, how do I word this question? Is it a job that is like taxing on the body? Like, for example, like if you have a longer flight, like across the ocean, like to like other countries, like maybe Europe or like to Africa or Asia, um, how do pilots usually prepare for flights like that?
That's actually a great question. So when we're preparing for longer flights, we there's a bunch of regulations that we have to abide by, even as pilots, and so do our companies. So we need legally at least 12 hours of duty-free period, which means that we need at least 12 hours not to work before we work for 72 hours. And that could be on long-term flights or it could be monthly between our flights. So between our trips, we need at least 12 hours of rest. So an example would be if I have a long flight from here to London and it takes about, let's say, 28 hours or more than 20 hours to get there, I would need at least 12 hours of rest. But not only that, I would have a co-pilot with me that legally we would only fly 12 hours during that time. So it is designed in a way where right now, as a flight instructor, I cannot fly more than 8 hours a day. And they make sure that they have these hour minimums and maximums because they know how exhausting flying can be on our bodies. So right now, as a flight instructor, I cannot fly more than 8 hours for hire. So that means that I cannot fly 8 hours of work, but I can still fly more if I just want to go and fly for fun. And the reason why they have that is because they know that the pressure of flying with other people and flying as a job can be much more stressful than just flying for fun. And that's why they say, like, the duty free period starts kicking in when you start going over a certain amount of time. And if you actually look at how much pilots fly a month, much compared to a regular job, as we would usually work 40 hours a week, pilots actually only fly maybe 85 hours a month. So but the reason why they do that is because it's a much more exhausting and stressful of a job than just working um, somewhere remotely or working in an office. Okay, any other questions? Anything that you guys have wanted to ask about pilots?
I have another question. You mentioned that
Sure.
for the long haul flights, you guys have a co-pilot, and then do you guys switch every 12 hours? Is that how that works? And then like, do you guys get to sleep,
hmm
or do you guys get a break? Like, how does that work during the flight?
So the way that it works is I just gave 12 hours as an example for a 24-hour flight. So I was showing it as that it would be split evenly between the captain and first officer. So there's always one captain on board that sits on left seat, and there's always a first officer that sits in the right seat. And what they do for longer term flights is that they split it in half. So um, the way that it would work if we take a regular 5-hour flight, one person would do the walk around, which is the pre-flight inspection of the aircraft, making sure everything's perfectly in tune and everything looks out of the ordinary. They check the fuel, they check to see if the aircraft logs are all good to go. And then the other officer, the other pilot, stays in the plane and gets their clearance to take off. That's a lot of paperwork. That's also checking with the company, our ETA time, our departure time, making sure that the passengers get to their destination on time from not only the pilot side, but also from a company side. So and then depending on who wants to fly that leg, so let's say the captain chooses to fly that trip, then the trip back, the first officer would fly. So they always split it, either on the way there or back. So the way long-term flights work is that instead it's just one long trip. So they would split it. If the first officer wants to fly the first half, then the captain would fly the other half. So that way they can split it. And typically no one is allowed to sleep on the flight because it is a two pilot job at that point. But sometimes for longer trips, and depending on your company, it really all goes back to your company that you're flying with, for the airlines. Sometimes they'll also have a third pilot in the jump seat. It's an extra seat in the middle, just monitoring, and that would be on longer term flights. But it goes all the way back to your company and what they allow and what they don't allow. And going back to those longer flights, so the pilots do also, this is something I've heard some people ask. The captain and the first officer actually do eat different meals. So every time we take a break as well, just to eat or anything, um, the first officer or the captain would be handed a meal. and the other pilot would be handed a separate meal. And the reason why they even do that is so in case there is something that's going around in the food, if any food is spoiled or anybody gets food poisoning, we also have a other pilot there that can take over in case the other pilot gets sick. So that is why pilots eat different food from that flight.
Cool. We have another question from Kate McGuire. What has been an exciting experience while being a pilot?
That's a hard question, actually. I think that was probably the hardest question so far. And it's because I've just had so many amazing stories as a pilot. I've done and I've seen such amazing places so far. One of my favorites was when I flew out to California to actually ferry over it was a turbocharged aircraft. I ferried it over to Nevada. We ended up going to um, we ended up going to Ohio as well, and then we went back to Utah, and we dropped off the plane to the owner, and we stayed with the owner for a couple days. We flew around San Francisco. I saw, I saw the Yosemite area around California, and just that experience and meeting the people and flying on a completely different part of the United States was amazing. And that was one of the most favorite trips that I've done. I've done, trips to Florida, I've done trips to Nashville, Tennessee, I've done trips to Cleveland, I've done trips to Virginia, the Carolinas, and I I've just had such amazing experiences. I don't think I can name one in particular, but I will tell you, as a pilot, you will be flying a lot and there's a lot of opportunities. You will meet a lot of people. You might not be home as much, but that's all dependent on what you want as a pilot. And if you have in the future, if you have a family, or if you want to stay home more, or if you have ties in the city that you live in and you want to stay home more, there's definitely ways to make that happen. You don't have to go to the airlines. You can fly corporate, which would be just taking up passengers for a smaller every night. Again, you don't have to go on 3-4 day trips. It's all really dependent on what you want in life. I love long-term trips. I love being, out for a couple days in a different state. But if you don't like that, you don't have to make that your life. You can still come back and be home every night if you want to. It really just depends on what you want as a pilot. So that's all I would have to say. I don't think I've had one bad experience. I think every experience I have every single day is just amazing. All right, anything else?
Yeah, we're gonna take any last minute questions in the chat. Since we're going to start wrapping up soon. I do have another question. Are there different levels of like piloting? Like, is there different training for pilots that do get to do those long haul flights versus the ones that do like domestic flights? Do they have to get like a special license, or just like do a little bit of more training in regards to that?
So that's actually a great question. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when you do, just for example, local flights versus international flights. First, for international flights, you do need your radio operating license, which lets you fly international. So that's one big difference. Another difference would be you are flying a larger aircraft, because the aircraft that are used for just local domestic flights, they don't have enough fuel to survive those long-term flights, to fly through the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. So you would need training and a type rating, which is the type of aircraft rating and training to fly at least an Airbus, or at least a Boeing 787 you would need definitely a different type of license to fly those aircrafts. And then you would need, which would be safety training. The safety training really depends on your aircraft type, but also how long and the scenarios and the situations that can occur from flying over water. And, in case of engine failures, in case of, electrical failures. So the training would just be different depending on the aircraft type, but the how long the flight is doesn't really matter, more than the aircraft that you're flying.
Sounds good. Were you scared on your first flight? Because I know you probably had to do a lot of training on your flight simulator. I don't remember how many hours you said
So,
that you spent on that, but was there someone there to guide you during your first flight, and like, did you feel comfortable?
so yeah, so my first flight, that I ever did was an intro flight. So I went up with an instructor at that time. And right when we took off, I knew I fell in love. I was not scared, but I know some people, I've taken up some people who actually get sick. I've had some people throw up on me. I always carry bags with me. My first flight, I was not scared. I knew right away that, I remember when we first did, it was called a steep turn. So we banked 45 degrees and we pitched up and trying to keep our altitude. So we felt more of a G force on our body. So I remember going through that experience. I just was more of an instant reaction. But um, when I started flight training, I started flying from the beginning. You actually don't need any simulator training before you jump in a plane, as long as it's with an instructor that obviously is qualified. You don't really do sim training for your first license, until you start going into your instrument training, which is for a separate license. So you know everybody reacts differently to flying, especially in a small plane, which is where you'll be started out on. I would just recommend booking an intro flight before jumping into aviation, just so your body can feel it out before you start, making any agreements to sign up and becoming a pilot. Just go up with an instructor, a trusted flight school, and see if your body can even handle the stress of, flying. Because it's not for everybody. I used to believe it was until I started having a lot of people throw up in the plane. And I saw a lot of people that, they would sign up for a program, and then later on, 10 hours later, they realize that this is a lot of stress on my body. So the biggest thing I would say is that, just stay healthy as a pilot. And going back to the question, is that I personally wasn't scared, but everybody's body reacts differently. So that's the biggest thing about learning and knowing if you are capable to fly, is that just do an intro flight and see if that experience will work for you.
Perfect. Well, we are just about at 5 o'clock, so we can start wrapping this up. Thank you to everybody for attending our event, and thank you to Noor especially for participating in our event. You can follow along to all of our upcoming events on our Instagram, our Twitter, and our Facebook, like I mentioned before. And I also did drop our registration link for our newsletter in the chat if you'd like to register for that. But thank you to everybody, and I hope you guys have a beautiful night.
Bye, guys.